So we don't need alright, so yeah, so you guys can see these values, okay? Alright, so this is just a quick video showing what's happening as to why we are getting additional spawn location increments through this trick that sets up being able to get this this warp forward to the checkpoint that's further in the level, which we haven't reached yet, which is pretty cool. Okay, so a few things to point out. One is the spawn location. That's the value here. The address is 017E. This is the address that controls where the game thinks you are in the level, so that once you reach, say, a certain value and you die, the game says, okay, you've reached spawn location value 6. Well, the last checkpoint was 5 and you passed that, so when you die you get put at 5. Likewise, if the spawn location reaches 26, at any point, doesn't matter where you are in the level, as long as that value is 26 and you die, it'll place you at the spawn point for 26, which is how this works. We're going to get to a location where technically you usually only have about 20, okay, but you end up with 26 around that time, because we're going to manipulate this memory address. Okay, the second one you see is the scroll boundary. Now right now it's a 1, but as you'll be able to see here, I gotta get this task editor. That 1 will become a 0 as soon as the screen stops scrolling to the right. You see how it stops and becomes a 0. Alright. The reason why that's important, because this memory address is 0177. As soon as that hits 0, you'll notice that the microframes stop. Your microframes, alright, as you can see, it goes up as you go to the right, and it goes up at the same amount as your run speed value. So for example, right now our micro is at 72 and our run speed is at 27. So next frame our micro is going to be at 98. Okay, so basically your running speed, whether it's you're holding up at top speed, you'll get 26 every frame. If you're just holding right, this run value is going to, and I'll be able to show you here, it will fluctuate. If you look at your run speed, it's going to fluctuate between 22 and 26. So every single frame, it's either adding 22 or 26 to your micro frame address. Okay. The other one to take note of when I go through this with you is the macro frame. Your macro frame does the same thing as the micro frame, but it every single time the micro frame advances gets to 256, it rolls over to 0. When that happens, your micro frame memory address goes up by 1. All right, so I'm going to scroll this here till we hit the boundary again, which is on this frame, which happens to be the same frame that the game decides to give you an increment for the spawn location. Okay, at this point, you'll also notice that your macro frame goes to 96 at this point. It goes to 96. This is important because the macro frame needs to be at 96 when we get hit in the face. It's always going to be 96, but it needs to remain as it scrolls to the left when we get to the bottom of the elevator, and you'll see. Now, if you look at your micro frames, there's 24. The larger, 24 is the largest number that you can have right here. The reason being is because if I unfortunately, based on how it works, you can't have you won't have a 26 here, because it would have to be at 0, the previous frame, in which case when you hit this point it's not going to add that in. So I think 24 is the highest value that you can get here, which is because it rolls over from 254. Once again, we're adding 26 to it, and so we end up rolling over and getting 24 here. All right. So different things that you do will influence what your microframes will be at this point, and this is what causes the variations, and whether this one of the variations why it would work or not. So for instance, we're just having we have a 24 when we get there, but what we're going to do is we're going to change one of these to an R, and then we're going to slow it down, and we're going to get to the end, and now we have 0 microframes. 0 microframes means that when we get hit in the face at the bottom of this, oops, a second, I have to hold up longer because it's taking more frames to get there. Okay. So it's because the microframes are at 0, as soon as you get hit, the macro frame is going to drop down to 95. Right there. Because of that, you'll notice that we don't get any additional value in the spawn location address. The reason being is because it has already become 95. For some reason, when the macro frame remains 96, we will continue to get increments every frame until it hits 95. So, for example, that's just me changing the running speed near the end. That was the difference of whether or not it was going to work or not. So this time we're going to restore this. All right, so we're going to run on to it. We have 24 microframes, which means that when we start getting hit, when we get hit and we start moving to the left with the boost to the left, the damage animation goes to the left. The value, those microframes are going to count down about 4 every single, every frame. And every frame that we remain at macro frame 96, we get 1 increment in the spawn location address. So I'll show you how that works. All right, so we're about to take it in the face. All right, this is the first time we get an increment. We got hit right here, and you notice that the micro frame dropped by 4. But we still have 20 left. But watch this. Alright, so we no longer, so it went down every 4. So every 4 microframes that you have at that point will become 1 value in your spawn location. And now we no longer have any microframes. So when we scroll it one more, it hits 95. We no longer see any increments. We only have the increments here, 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 and here, and here, because we still have some microframes in the 96 macroframe region. So really, that's how this works. For whatever reason, you will have a different number of microframes when you get onto the elevator. And depending on how many microframes you have is going to determine if you get additional increments, and if you do, how many increments you'll get in memory address 017E. So I don't know why this works this way. I don't know if knowing this is going to make any difference, and being able to maybe find somewhere else in the level where this takes place. All I know is that doing the same things as much as possible throughout the up to this point is going to give you it's going to give you a consistent range of micro frames at this point. So you can look at my tutorial for what I think is the best setup for it right now, which will yield either a 13, a 14, or a 0. Sorry, an 8. The 8 means you're not getting any increments at all. The 8 simply means that you've gotten to the bottom of this elevator here, which occurs once again as soon as the scroll boundary is reached. The game gives you another increment. That's how it decides to give you increments, is at when you reach a boundary, and also after a certain amount of scrolling. That's how that's going to work. So with that said, I hope that's helpful. So that's it. Alright, so now I can make those two highlights, both the